Hello, friends, and welcome back to our Secular Buddhist Essentials class. My name is Venerable Tarpa, and before we begin, let's take a moment to appreciate our Sangha. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And as conscientious practitioners, which we all are, we must more than ever recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Oh, those are pretty. Hey, friends, welcome back. It's so lovely to see everybody. We have some new friends that have showed up. Rinchins here. Oh, lovely to see everyone. So, we're back at another skillful living class. I've been spending all morning trying to figure out how I'm going to present this material. And the challenge of this program is that SBT, we're kind of nutty, right? Most videos you click on and they simply tell you about the title of the program. You click on a video of dependent originations, they tell you what dependent origination is. And I had a friend in the Sangha who mentioned, he goes, maybe that's what people want. They don't want to click on a video and end up with more questions and answers. And surely that's the nature of folks, but I like to be blatantly honest. And maybe it's really cool that we do some really weird videos from a really weird kind of perspective. And I think it's worth being different. Anyways, a challenge to this program is that we're actually writing this text as we're teaching the program. And the advantage is that we have everyone in the Sangha to participate in it. So I found in the past, we've done this with some of our lesser programs, and we always end up with outstanding material when we're finished. So I'm counting on that because I appreciate the brilliance of our Sangha. But in this text, which will eventually be called Secular Buddhist Essentials, we're going to be we want to offer a simple presentation for the more novice. And then a lot of the deeper material we're going to put in the end notes, caveats, antidotes, alternative views, clarification, stuff like that. And so that'll be a nice way to present it. But we don't have a text finished yet. So in these online classes, I have to kind of do a little bit of both. So we'll start off with a simple presentation, and then we'll get into questions and comments, and I'll add some of the clarifications. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The advantage is that these programs will be good for the advanced and the novice. So that's exciting. Um, the other benefit is that um, at the same time, this program serves as a place to consolidate and reconcile my own views, right? So, like all week before this class, I decided, oh, we'll do a simple presentation on nirvana and samsara. And so I start writing it all. But as you write, your mind gets flooded with all kinds of great ideas, and it creates a wonderful space to finally figure out exactly what is the SBT view, my own view, or even the secular Buddhist view. I think a text like the one we're working on is really needed. We have a lot of texts out that are about secular Buddhists, but this text is going to be step by step all the uh, secular Buddhist views according to our organization, our presentation, in one by one through a text, which is going to cover introducing it, what a secular presentation of what the Buddha taught, and as well as practicing engaging with it. So very unusual the way that works. And and the final text will end up being a full and final secular Buddhist view and presentation. Um, so, and a friend, he was mentioning that, you know, maybe people don't want to come on and end up with more questions than they started with. And I thought, yeah, a lot of people don't want to look behind the curtain, right? Like in this class, we're actually we're creating the whole thing out in the open. And in a sense, it can be a little dangerous as well because we can go about something and a few weeks later realize, boy, were we wrong about that, right? So new views I often like to sit on for a while and work out. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that in this week's class. Hey, let's just get to it. Those are all my apologies for what's to come right now. But anyways, what I thought I would do is just go through the short presentation, and I think to make it even easier, I think I'll put it on screen so you guys can read along, because maybe it's a bit technical, a bit dense, and I have to decide if I want this presentation or maybe I want something a little smaller, because we are at the beginning of the text in the introduction section. So part of me is thinking, let's do a simple presentation here, and then at the end we can we can share a little piece that says this material will be covered in a deeper length later in the book, and maybe in part two we could get into the depth of it. So maybe you can give me some of your opinions on that too, whether you think this is too dense this early in the text. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen and we can read it together. Okay, common existence and awakened existence. So we're going to go through it and then we'll go back through it and I'll answer all your questions. The Buddha asserted two modes of existence: common existence, which he referred to as samsara, and awakened existence, which he referred to as nirvana. Common and awakened existence can be understood as a state or qualities of the mind, states of mind that govern our view of reality, thereby defining our experience of it. These mental states represent two ends of a spectrum, with common existence representing confusion and ignorance at its far end, and awakened existence representing clarity and liberation at the other. Common existence is a state of mind that misapprehends the true nature of ourselves in reality, a state of mind that doesn't accurately understand life and therefore doesn't properly engage with it. It's a habitual mundane existence. Mundane because we don't truly appreciate the wonder and potential of our existence. And habitual because we experience life primarily in a kind of semi-conscious state, as if we're operating on autopilot, sleepwalking through our lives, blindly following ingrained habits, patterns, and social conditioning. Although common existence is filled with joy and delight, it's also plagued by our human afflictions and the sufferings that arise from them. Afflictions such as ignorance, confusion, selfishness, greed, immaturity, worry, anxiety, fear, arrogance, vanity, and various cognitive biases. The mental state of samsara is an exaggeration of reality beyond that which actually exists. It arises from our ignorance that misapprehends the true nature of ourselves and reality. According to Buddhism, out of fear that arises in relation to the subtle, ethereal, and transient manner in which we truly exist, a state in which we feel unstable, isolated, and vulnerable. We grasp for and thereby create an exaggerated view of our own substantialness, our validity, and our importance. However, by falsely exaggerating the importance of things, we unknowingly also create an exaggerated sense of immediacy in our lives that also doesn't exist. This immediacy is felt as heightened anxiety, fear of loss, the need to protect and preserve oneself, one's possessions, and one's identity. It's this exaggerated reality from which Buddhism seeks liberation. Traditionally, samsara, which is a Pali and Sanskrit term, is translated as wandering through or circling, commonly translated as cyclic existence, to be trapped in the cycle of rebirth, is depicted as a state or quality of the mind pervaded by ignorance, delusion, afflictions, suffering, and perpetuated by wrong views and misguided intentions. To be trapped in samsara is to be trapped within our own self-generated delusions and ignorance. And we'll go back through these, don't worry. Then we have awakened existence, which is to transcend common existence and the suffering stemming from it. It's a state of mind that clearly realizes or awakens to the true nature of ourselves in reality, a state of mind that accurately understands life and therefore properly engages with it. It's liberated existence, liberated because of being freed from ignorance, afflictions, and the suffering they cause. It's to engage fully with life, being fully present and aware, to attain mastery over one's mind and life, through which we clearly apprehend and appreciate the wonder and potential of our existence. Traditionally, awakening is the translation of a Pali Sanskrit term, bodhi, to awaken. However, usually the term nirvana is used to represent the awakened state. Nirvana is understood as the awakened state of mind achieved through the process of awakening. Nirvana, Pali and Sanskrit, is translated as to extinguish the three poisons of greed, hatred, and ignorance, and the suffering related to them. Often defined simply as freedom from afflictions, the mental state of nirvana is understood by way of negation, meaning nirvana isn't something, but instead it's the absence of something. It's the absence of ignorance, afflictions, and suffering within the mind, which is the purification of the mind. When asked to define nirvana, the Buddha would simply say, nirvana is the end of suffering. Awakening should be seen not as a single event, but as a spectrum of events, a continuum of increasingly refined mental and meditative states, an incremental awakening to the way things truly are, awakening to the true nature of oneself and reality. Awakening begins with our first experience of true presence, and then unfolds through various stages of higher awareness, such as sustained single-pointed attention, the experience of stillness and equanimity, the attainment of samadhi, the realization of nirvana, and ultimately progressing through various levels of awakening. Boy, that was a mouthful. Did I overdo it? What do you guys think? I can't see everybody, so please just chime in if you can. Um, if that's good with you. What am I doing? Oh, here we go. I can see everybody now.
I think it was really well done and very clear.
I'm going to make you co-host, Swambo. Please tell me if anybody has any. I'm going to
Okay.
do this for a second. I'm sorry. I'm getting my buttons mixed up. I'll leave this on the screen. Any immediate questions before we start going through it again? Yeah, David. I told you this was going to be contentious class, David.
I'm not being contentious. My
Of
question,
course you are.
it's just a tiny, tiny wee question. And what that was when you listed the afflictions at first, I noticed anger wasn't one of them. And I just wondered what the logic of that is.
Well, the three poisons, it's hatred, right? Not anger.
No, it's not
It's
there I'm talking about. When you're going through all the afflictions such as ignorance, confusion, selfishness, speed, maturity, I just
yeah,
wondered
right
what
up in
that was.
here.
Hmm?
Yeah, I have greed. Yeah, hatred, huh? Now are you happy?
It's just
Man, that guy. Just teasing. So here's my first question for all of you. Tarpa, what are you doing translating samsara as common existence? That's unheard of. You're not allowed to do different things in Buddhism. So,
Can you point to where that
so,
is, please? Oh, right here. Okay, I see it.
so for a while now, I was trying to think about, I like to use English terms. And for a while, I was trying to really get around how do we translate samsara and nirvana? And do we? Sometimes there's certain things we just, bodhicitta, we never try to translate. But with this, and sometimes I've defined it as mundane habitual existence, which I share here. And then it occurred to me of as defining it as ordinary common existence. And I thought just, oh, common existence. But this opened up a floodgate of epiphany for me. And the idea is all of a sudden I saw how what I would say how poorly misrepresented represented samsara or ordinary existence is. In Buddhism, when we posit the idea of samsara, it's painted as a ghastly state, right? A state of endless rebirth and suffering and misery and and I thought I'm not sure if I really agree with that characterization. I think and there's some to be said that like the Buddha mentions in the sutras that if people don't recognize the suffering in their lives and just how miserable they are, they'll never uh, they'll never really put the effort in to achieve enlightenment. So the idea is, was the Buddha being skillful by painting this horrendous picture of common existence? So when we talk about samsara, we're talking about common existence. We're talking about your lives. We're talking about your lives, the lives of all your friends, all your family. You're talking about my life. And guess what? It's not just the life of horrible things and suffering and ignorance and delusion. Sure, those things are there, no doubt about it. I will not deny those aspects. But you know what? It's also full of beauty and joy and goodness and many, many wonderful qualities, right? And then if you read the sutras, you can see that the Buddha clearly feels the same way. There's two passages that really stuck out to me. One was in one of the sutras, the Buddha says, if there was no pleasure or gratification in ordinary existence, beings wouldn't be enamored with it, right? These pleasures in life, they're true. They are pleasures. Now Buddhism argues that there's greater pleasures to be had, that a lot of these pleasures we have are passing, like a piece of candy, right? You have a piece of candy, oh, it's just lovely, and then it disappears, and they're passing pleasures. um but we have pleasures of all kinds, and oh, there's another passage that the Buddha says the realization of the Four Noble Truths, meaning the attainment of awakening, is not attained through suffering and displeasure. Rather, it's gained through happiness and joy. That's a direct quote from the sutras. So, and there's many more. So, there's both kind of presentations of common existence from the Buddha himself. And so, though I do see the benefit of clearly understanding the condition of common existence, and also being aware that there's that awakened existence is way better, which great deal of Sangha members here can attest to. Nevertheless, I kind of just thought the way we use samsara is a misrepresentation, misleading description. And if anything, we want to be honest and we want to be accurate. So it occurred to me that calling it for what it really is, just common existence, right? Having both is more accurate, less problematic. And then, yeah, okay. So that was the first thing. And I was certain people, you were all going to object. How can you call samsara common existence? Because that's really what it is, right? And then awakened existence is the English translation for nirvana, is a good one. Now, here's the thing that as I read through it, awakening really isn't the translation for nirvana, it's the translation for bodhi, which means to awaken. So here's a difficult thing to get your mind around, that in the Theravada school, they see nirvana as the highest goal, or at least that's what we used to think. Bhikkhu Bodhi did a video in which he claimed that there's a difference between nirvana and full awakening, right? So we mentioned that awakening is this incremental spectrum of experiences, right? So to have your first experience of true presence. Now, what we mean by true presence is anyone can be present when we say, okay, focus on your breath. Okay, you're present. You're not thinking of the past and future. Though it's accurate, we're talking about the first experiential sensation of presence. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. This calmness, this bliss that kind of comes over you. That's the first experience of awakening. And you can describe it as presence is when you are no longer on autopilot, right? Presence and autopilot are opposites. So when you're not operating on autopilot, clearly you're awake, right? You're aware of what's happening around you, your processes, you're fully present, right? So that's the first experience of awakening. And then we have this spectrum. Now, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, that nirvana isn't the final stage. There's enlightenment or full awakening. Nowadays, most modern scholars are moving away from the word enlightened, which was always, enlightenment was always the big word for me. Most have agreed that awakening is a much more accurate term, one that I've always enjoyed myself. And so the idea that nirvana is experiential, it's an experience, or it's the coming out of an experience, depending on how deep you want me to explain it. But it's more of an experiential quality, where awakening is very much that, but also this direct realization of knowledge, right? And in fact, the word bodhi is, let alone is it defined as awakening or enlightenment, but it's also defined as supreme knowledge. So there's that aspect of wisdom, or we would say here, higher understanding, which, because you can have an experience of nirvana and yet still not have a direct experience of the Buddha's teachings, the nature of oneself and reality, right? Those two don't necessarily come together. So Bhikkhu Bodhi, which is strange because he's a Theravada Buddhist, claims that you can reach nirvana, but then full awakening is having the full understanding of the Buddhist teachings, meaning the nature of reality. Generally, we think of the Theravada seeing nirvana as the highest state. Mahayanas believe that you can go further than nirvana to full awakening and actually become a Buddha yourself, right? So you can see that awakening is the proper term for this spectrum of higher awareness, right? All of those things I mentioned, they're all forms of higher awareness: presence, nirvana, stillness, um, um, equanimity, some samadhi. They're all forms of higher meditative and mental and meditative states. One more.
So is that idea saying that you can reach nirvana, but then that means you have to have almost like a more of a learnt kind of experience, like you have to have more of an educational experience, like you have to then have a more scholarly experience, like you have to know the sutras, you have to have more of a Buddhist education to have a higher enlightenment, I don't want to say enlightenment, awakening.
So when we're talking about right view, right? So nirvana, we're saying that you can gain nirvana without having complete right view. Right view is that proper view of the true nature of oneself, reality, the Buddhist teachings. So right view is accomplished conceptually, but then ultimately attained through direct experience. So the question is yes to both. The answer is yes to both. We experience it, we practice it as students. Remember, it starts right at the beginning with somebody teaching you how to meditate. That's all conceptual. But nirvana, yeah, it seems like nirvana is more of something that we attain on the cushion, where the Buddhist teachings themselves give us more information so we can reach a higher level of wisdom that's more than that. So I don't know if it's safe to say, but these are touchy subjects because everybody has a different opinion. But let's say that nirvana is more related to experiential, and then the final piece is much more about full wisdom, right? Yeah. Yeah, at the top of at the highest states of awareness, these are very, very subtle things. A lot of people have very conflicting views on it. David.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether, particularly in the introduction to something like this, these discussions about the very high end of awareness are really relevant to people. I know it's a huge area of discussion, but I mean, like I say, for a beginner, is it relevant to go into that kind of detail?
Well, that's kind of what I was implying at the beginning, that we have to figure out what's appropriate at the beginning of the book. Clearly, in the second part of this text, where we get into the deep philosophical teachings of the Buddha, a lot of this would be deeper. But I thought I left a lot of it out in the text. We're talking about it now just because a lot of the stuff we're talking about will end up in the end notes. So the idea is that a beginner could read through this, get a fairly good idea with it without answering the questions we're talking about right now.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
We're talking about them because people are asking about them. Another thing here, to see uh, to see nirvana and samsara as a spectrum, with common existence representing confusion and ignorance at its far end. Do you see where that says that? This is an important part because common existence, your and my life, you know, it's not doesn't have to be filled with confusion and ignorance, but we both know there's many beings in common existence that are at that far end who deal with terrible afflictions and addictions, and there is that side of humanity that exists in that very, very end part of just deep confusion and ignorance. So that is a part of common existence. And then also we have the high end of common existence, where people, whether they're Buddhists or not, live exceptional lives with great clarity and great happiness because they understand life. So that's why I really wanted to change the way we look at this expression of samsara. I don't believe it's accurate. At least our view of it is. And I think they all do it, they do it for the right reason. It reminds me of monasticism. So they they like to paint these pictures for monastics of the human body just being the most disgusting thing, a big bag filled of blood and pus and urine and poop, and for so to make it easier for monastics to be celibate, right? But it's not accurate. It's kind of manipulative, don't you think? And I think maybe that's okay for children, but that's not how we should. Human body is a beautiful thing. I can name a few quite beautiful human beings. So I like to be unapologetically honest. I wonder if you guys appreciate that same notion. Yes. Okay. Another friend of mine. Well, I think I mentioned already. I said, don't apologize for your views. Be bold and share it, and then have your explanations later in the end notes. Be bold and share it. Shiva.
Um, I want to say something about the monastic view you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's manipulative. I think it's one perspective because you can't deny what they say. It is a collection of, like you said, blood and organs and stuff like that. Which
Hair follicles,
yeah, so which which we were to
nose hairs, and toenails.
yeah, so stuff like that. So yeah.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay. And so going through that, then we talk about living in this habitual life, kind of in a semi-conscious state. I didn't like the term semi-conscious, but I just couldn't find a better term. But this has been referred to across multiple disciplines. Marcus Aurelius presents a beautiful depiction of this in Meditations, in which he talks about um, a snow coming down and covering the people's eyes with a sleep, and everybody just walks around as if they're asleep, and we have to rub that snow out of our eyes. So many cultures see this. So, um, but I thought that's kind of okay. And then I talked about operating on autopilot, which I think is the clearest, but not the most poetic, right? Sleepwalking through our lives, that's pretty good. Blindly following ingrained habits, patterns, and social conditioning, that's pretty clear. And then I like the fact that instead of positing all the suffering and everything, we just start off with, well, although common existence is filled with joy and delight, which it is, it's also plagued with human affliction. Another thing they talk about when I went to school, Tibetan tradition, they say, oh, all pleasure in ordinary existence turns to suffering. And I had a problem with that. Of course, that's not true, right? We can have many experiences that don't turn to suffering. You can do a lovely favor or help somebody, feel great about it, and that can never change to the day you die. That's a beautiful memory that you take to your deathbed, right? The birth of your first child, that memory, that experience can do, or depending, hopefully, you have a healthy birth, that is. That can be an experience that's just you cherish until the day you die. Yes, that child can bring misery into your life in different situations, but those are different experiences. And so quite a bit of the things that I learned, I just found nonsensical. And so with our secular Buddhist presentation, I wanted to iron some of that out. So okay. And then, what do you guys think of this idea of samsara and nirvana being mental states? So there's two presentations of this. One group believes that samsara is the cycling in rebirth of dying, taking on rebirth, pain and suffering over and over. It is that cycle. And another school believes, no, it's the mental state that perpetuates that cycle. As you can imagine, I'm of the later. Even in my own monastery, the Gelug tradition, we had teachers that had both different versions of that. To me, it seems more that it's a mental state. Some of my favorite authors or scholars make great arguments, so I'm really happy with that argument as well. So so yeah, I see these both as a common existence, and awakened existence is simply a mental state. And maybe even clearer, it's based on our perspective. You know, this idea that's often attributed to the Buddha, though he doesn't actually say it, that what you think you become, right? And the idea is that our lives are what we think. But more accurately, our lives are what we perceive, interpret, and project. But it is true. And throughout Buddhism, in the sutras, they say that in a lot of different ways. And so when we're in common existence because of that mental that mental state, those afflictions that we have, and to awaken is to change our perspective, right? Perspective is the most important quality in purification in Buddhism, right? The way we see, interpret, understand, perpetuate, project reality is our reality. So they're both mental states. In case you were interested. Now, then what do you think about, have you guys heard before this notion of how common existence comes about? That it's out of fear that arises in relation to the subtle, ethereal, and transient manner in which we truly exist? That we're kind of afraid of this feeling of that we're not as substantial as we think we are. We feel isolated and vulnerable. You know that morning affirmation SBT members have on samsara nirvana, and it says through reifying my identity, which means exaggerating my identity and making it more substantial than it actually is, right? To make it more concrete. By reifying my identity, I reify my vulnerability, right? If we see ourselves more concrete, then our vulnerability is more concrete. Through reifying my vulnerability, I reify my problems. Through reifying my problems, I reify my suffering. Then conversely, by realizing the ethereal nature of my identity, the way it truly exists, not as substantial as a thing. Our identity, we're an idea, we're a concept, right? By understanding the ethereal nature of my identity, I realize the ethereal nature of my vulnerability. It too is not as substantial as I think. By realizing the ethereal nature of my identity, vulnerability, I realize the ethereal nature of my problems. The realizing the ethereal nature of my problems, I realize the ethereal nature of my suffering. I'll put that in the text. That'd be a nice little piece. And you get this sense of immediacy, right? Many great teachers talked about where samsara really comes from is our sense of busyness and speediness, anxiety, creating this sense of immediacy that everything in life is so important in every moment. I'm laughing because I have a great way of imagining that I'm really fond of. So if you really want to know that mechanism of samsara, just picture a dramatic middle school student, right? Whatever you want, you picture it. They're waking up in the morning with a pimple, or they got to go to school without the cool shoes that all the other kids are wearing, or somebody gossiped about them, right? Do you know the reaction? It's like the world is over, isn't it? They have a pimple. Oh my God, how can I ever show my face at school ever again? They think the world is over. I might as well throw myself off a bridge. That drama, right? That is the nature of samsara. That's one of the greatest examples. And guess what? We're all still doing it. Now, it might not be as exaggerated as when we were kids, but in a sense, that same mechanism is playing out in our lives, right? When we're kids, it only takes a little thing to trigger it, right? Your pants fall down when you're in seventh grade, and for the rest of your life, you think you can never show your face again. So the mechanism is clear. It's right there in front of all of us. And maybe you don't have to go that far. Maybe you have brothers or sisters or spouses that, oh my God, they didn't put the right silverware out at the restaurant, or they didn't come around to top off my water, and they never going to eat at their restaurant again, right? I have vegan friends that find out that their food wasn't cooked in a proper vegan frying pan. It may have touched animal products. And more, you should have seen them freaking out. So yeah, that's there, right? Oh, what do you guys think? I'm gonna take this off the screen. I want to see all your shiny faces. What do you guys think? So now
I,
this is the part I want to know what you think so we can add it to the text. You guys are helping me write the text.
Tarpa, I had a question.
Yep.
So, um, so I can't, from my perspective, the perspective that samsara and nirvana are like not not so literal, that they're mental states, that vibes with me. I've generally always felt that way. I've never really felt that thinking of those terms in extremely literal way is exactly, it's not the right approach for me. Maybe for others, but that's what works for them.
That's a
Um,
healthy attitude.
and then as for, I would say that, you know, the Buddhist path of being called the middle way makes a lot of sense to me, because it's generally seen as the kind of the middle between extremes. That, I guess, you know, I would link it to the idea that neither a hedonistic or an ascetic lifestyle is exactly very healthy. And I think that's very
Exactly.
practical. And generally speaking, when you're faced with a choice between two extremes, I think generally finding the middle ground between those things is a good approach. That's what works for me. But one thing I had a question about, which I thought was very interesting, is this could be a gap in my knowledge. But I always sort of viewed, and maybe this is a wrong view, but I viewed samsara and nirvana as being basically these somewhat polar opposites. And in your teaching today, I was very interested in when you said that there was sort of a spectrum between those things. Because for me, for a long time, I always viewed those things essentially kind of like an on-off switch. It's either one thing or the other thing. You're either, you know, you're either in a state of awakening or you're not in a state of awakening. It's either one or the other. And so, what is that spectrum?
You bring up an excellent point.
I really
All
want to
of-
hear more from you about
all
that.
of that I wanted to comment on. You got the right idea about all of it, right? And remind me that I want to talk a little bit more about the middle way. But let's get to that point you just made. And the fact is that, well, first of all, it seems like that spectrum, which we always talk about the different being samsara and nirvana, you know, representing the extremes. But it seems more clear that the opposites are samsara and awakening, and nirvana is somewhere in there. Maybe we're splitting hairs. Maybe, oh, nirvana's close enough. Let's just use that term, right? That's okay. But the fact is that, like we say, it's an incremental spectrum, right? And so we often think, oh, I'm going to practice real hard, and then boom, something's going to happen. Balloons are going to drop from the meditation center ceiling, and I'm an awakened being. You're carried around on everyone's shoulders. But the fact is, let alone as an incremental in attainment. It's incremental in sustaining it. Every day I'm different. Some days, so the idea is when people say, "Oh, Tenzin Tarpa, are you an awakened being?" And I say, "No, I'm awakening. I'm somewhere on that spectrum." Though Buddhism does posit full awakening. And in the sutras, the Buddha is clear about his experience underneath the Bodhi tree. So, some remarkable things happens. Like one, he sees this is traditional Buddhism. He sees all his past lives. He gains the ability to see the past and future lives and his future lives. He gains the ability to see the past and future lives of all sentient beings, right? And a slew of other stuff. So there is this idea of full awakening. And the Buddha, it seemed the Buddha, when it happened, he goes, that's it. If you remember, all of the Buddhist teachers up to this point all claimed that they knew the final state. Somehow the Buddha knew there was something more with every teacher he had. And then it wasn't until he himself reached the state and he says, aha, I got it. That's where it ends. There's full awakening. So in traditional Buddhism, that's clear that there is such a thing as full awakening. But it's also clear that awakening is a spectrum because nirvana and full awakening are different, as well as samadhi in these, right? So they're all higher, awakening are higher states of awareness. But every day we're different. When I'm in meditation, when I come out and I'm saying my prayers, man, am I close to awakening. Man, I'm telling you, I'm just a shot away from it. And then the phone rings and it's a telemarketer. How dare you call me? I'm saying my prayers and I'm nowhere close to awakening in that very next moment, right? So because of the things that are going on in our lives, depending on our mental states, we're always fluctuating. And when you get into those 4 levels of final full awakening, which they talk about in both the Theravada and the Mahayana, there's a residue of common existence that stays with it. So you've reached awakening, full awakening, but the first one, well, there's only in meditation on the cushion, and they call it, there's still a residue of ordinary existence, meaning you're still perceiving things, your perspective is still ordinary existence. And then the next one is on meditation, but also out of meditation a little bit, but still a residue. Then the third one is pretty much all the time, but still a residue. And then the fourth one is no residue. So you can see how it's a spectrum in every way. And so let alone is it day to day, you can see that you're more aware, you're more awake in some days than others. When you get sensitive to it, you can see it moment to moment or sentence by sentence. I'll say something, oh, that wasn't a very awakened comment I just made, So, and then I wanted to touch on, you mentioned about the middle way. So yeah, we got this beautiful middle way. You were accurate about all of it. But the one thing we have to be careful is not everything is middle way. We don't have a middle way between malevolence and benevolence, good and bad, right? The Buddha doesn't say, be good, but not too good. Be in the middle way, right? We don't have a middle way between awakening and samsara. The Buddha doesn't recommend us not to awaken too much. Kind of get in that middle zone, and that's good enough. Okay. Why is nobody laughing at my jokes today? I thought I was really, I don't know.
We're all thinking. I think Patrick had a question, Tarpa.
I think it's a tough crowd today. Patrick, please share.
It was more clarifying. I mean, I did the discussion that we were getting into, so it's not really big, but I was thinking like, were you looking for like feedback about the document? Like, so how's the document working? Or like what we thought about it? Because those are kind of 2 different veins, like how the document.
Either one. Sure.
Okay. So for the document, I thought it's you made it very clear what it's supposed to be. It's like, for someone who, like, for each of us probably, who comes to the website and is like, I have an inkling about this, and what is some of this stuff, and like it's just like a great solid way of getting into it with the understanding that like it doesn't have to be more than that. And so I'm not. So when I look at your definition of samsara, I'm like, you're the expert in the sense that like you're so familiar with it that I'm going to take what you are given as like a great summary. I'm not going to quibble about, oh, I think
And it didn't feel too dense.
exactly. So for me, that's
good news. When you write, you kind of lose the ability to judge your own writing.
Yeah.
Like in my head, it seems clear, but yeah, you don't know.
Yeah. And I appreciate Ethan's because for this kind of more question of like, what is it for us to discuss about? That's a cool question to discuss. And that I know I appreciate Ethan's question and other people's questions. So that's all I have to say.
Appreciate you, Patrick. And thank you so much for that. So now Patrick opens it up. That's exactly what I'm looking for here. Just thoughts on anything, like how it goes. What do you guys think about? Should I break it up? Should I do an even simpler version at the beginning of the text and kind of do a big rich one in part 2 when we talk about the Buddhist teachings? Kat's nodding her head yes. I thought about that.
I don't see the document itself as being overly complicated. I mean, it's relatively simple. I think it's not oversimplified, but I don't think it's like a huge long thing that nobody's going to understand. I feel like it's a pretty good balance.
Thank you.
At least as far as I can see.
I would agree with that. I think the conversation is too advanced, but the actual writing that you've done is fine for initial state.
Yeah, and of course, with secular Buddhism, what we're shooting for is clarity. And in so many ways, first of all, we're trying to clarify the fact that there are lots of opinions and lots of different views, and the sutras aren't always so clear. We want to make that clear to people. Kempo? Hey, keep it down, Wangmo.
Yes. How about those terms, stream enter, return or non-return or
non-return? So those are from the Theravada tradition, and those play into it as well. But again, I'll put that later in the text. And in part 2, we'll have a section on navigating the Buddhist path, and we'll do that. I come from the Mahayana tradition, but more and more I'm favoring the Theravada presentations, and I think we'll do a Theravada presentation of that as well. The Mahayana tradition is a lot more religious, the grounds and paths, it's called, if you're familiar with it, and the eons of lifetimes it takes to do each level. And maybe I'm just impatient.
Kuladasa, he's a stream enter.
Who is?
Kuladasa.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Wamo?
That's what he said.
Amazing.
No, I was just telling you Kempo had a question.
Yeah, a little bit of a shorter class. Was that helpful? Yeah, I like the presentation. I'm hoping that sometimes a little while, a couple weeks later, the text isn't going to be written to probably next year. So I have time to change my mind. And these videos will be abandoned. Next time we offer the program, we'll actually give proper classes for this program and record them. This is just this fun little experiment that we're doing. It is kind of fun though, isn't it? Next week, we're going to talk about rebirth. And that's another loaded topic, but I have a lot of great clarity for that. So pretty cool. And I think we're going to end up with a text that's very unique in the secular Buddhist and Buddhist world. I'm very excited about it. Any last comments, questions? Okay, now we'll save a little room for compliments. Anybody?
One more cool thing. I think I should actually compliment, like, I think you're doing a good job of, like, there are things in Buddhism where there really is a pretty consensus mainstream view, and like you can kind of say, even though there's infinite, you're giving that, and there's in cases where like each of the schools has their own path, and then you're saying, well, A, B, and C are options of thinking about this, and so I think we're trusting you, and you're doing a good job so far of like knowing when to say this is a pretty mainstream Buddhist belief, even though there's no such thing. And actually, this is like, somewhat different paths. So I think you're hitting that mark pretty well.
Yeah, that's our job. And that's pretty much the focus of secular Buddhism, is this real open-mindedness, this broad knowledge base that we derive everything from. And for SBT, it's me not telling anybody what is. I'm simply sharing all the information that I have, I've given experience to, and that I have access to. And each one of us makes up our mind for ourselves. That's what the Buddha would have liked.
I personally think it's brilliant. I think it hits just the right note of simplicity to line up with, the much more complex issues that we deal with.
Oh, thank you so much. I was rewriting it till like 2 a.m. I got up at 8, and then I rewrote it until about 5 minutes before class. And it seemed like
you'll be rewriting it for the next 4 years, but it's really good, in my opinion.
But boy, I think we hit on something quite profound there. I think we offer a really cool presentation outside of all the debates and yeah. Hey, that's cool. Hey, what do we so that's about it. This week, tomorrow, we have our mind training program at 1600 UTC with Tenzin Semten. The program has been fabulous. He's doing such a great job. Really active program. And we started its own chat group online. And then we'll have another class, Secular Buddhist Essentials, next Sunday. But also coming up, we have our level 2 of our Introduction to Meditation program. And please register and sign up. For some people, taking the program again is a cool idea. Level 2 shares some really fascinating and unique aspects of meditation that aren't shared other places, very unique to SBT and very powerful practices. So I'm thrilled to be sharing that with everybody. And then later in the fall, we'll have our level 3, which is on insight meditation. And that's another powerful practice, insight meditation, Vipassana. Oh, so with that said, we're all busiest Sangha on the net. So thanks everybody for coming. Let's end today with our altruistic affirmation. May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Remember that SBT was created for one purpose, way back when, 5 years ago when I started it, for one purpose, to support practitioners, period. Not to get my pretty face all over the internet. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.